Welcome to Nightmare Fuel Stories. Number the occupancy rate. I never wanted to move into the Blackwood, not really. But when you're 32 with mounting credit card debt and your roommate decides to move across the country with her boyfriend of 3 months, options become limited. Especially in this city, where rents climb faster than ivy on brick walls. The Blackwood apartment stood in the older part of town, a 7-story red brick building with black fire escapes zigzagging down its facade like metal veins. Built in the 1940s, it had the kind of architectural details developers don't bother with anymore: crown molding, hardwood floors, and windows tall enough to make you feel like you're getting more space than you're paying for. The rent was suspiciously reasonable. I should have questioned that more. "It's a steal," the property manager, Mr. Finch, had said when showing me Unit 4C. Previous tenant left rather suddenly. Company transfer. He was a thin man with thinning hair and glasses that magnified his eyes to an unsettling degree. "We don't like vacancies at the Blackwood." I signed the lease that afternoon. Moving day came and went without incident. My few possessions barely filled the one-bedroom apartment, making it seem even larger. That first night I slept soundly, exhausted from hauling boxes up 4 flights of stairs after the elevator mysteriously stopped working mid-afternoon. It was during my second week that I began to notice things, small things at first. The building was quiet, too quiet for an apartment complex in the middle of a city. Occasionally I'd hear footsteps in the hallway or a door closing, but never conversations, never music, never the ambient sounds of people living their lives. "It's an older crowd," Mr. Finch explained when I mentioned it while collecting my mail. "Professionals mostly, people who appreciate privacy." I nodded, though something in his explanation didn't quite sit right. But then again, after years of paper-thin walls and shared apartments, maybe I should have been grateful. I met my first neighbor 3 weeks after moving in. Mrs. Abernathy from 4A was a small woman with silver hair pulled into a tight bun. I ran into her at the mailboxes in the lobby. "Oh, you must be the new tenant in 4C, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Welcome to the Blackwood, thank you." "I'm Eliza," I offered my hand, which she took after a moment's hesitation. "You'll find it's very peaceful here," she said, her eyes darting around the lobby. "We all like it that way." Before I could respond, the elevator dinged and Mr. Finch stepped out. Mrs. Abernathy stiffened visibly. "Ah, I see you've met one of our long-term residents," he said, smiling that too-wide smile of his. "Mrs. Abernathy has been with us for, what is it now, 15 years? 17, she corrected quietly. "Of course 17, time flies when you're happy where you live, doesn't it?" He placed a hand on her shoulder, and I could have sworn I saw her flinch. "I should be getting back," she murmured, clutching her mail to her chest. "Nice to meet you, Eliza." As she hurried to the elevator, I noticed her hands were trembling. "She's a bit of a recluse," Mr. Finch said, watching the elevator doors close. "Most of our residents are rather private." "You'll get used to it." That night I couldn't sleep. The silence of the building seemed to press against my eardrums. I found myself straining to hear something, anything, that would remind me I wasn't alone in this massive structure. Around 2 a.m. I finally heard it, a soft, rhythmic tapping from somewhere above me. Tap, 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 pause, tap, tap, tap. It continued for nearly an hour before stopping abruptly. I told myself it was just pipes or someone with insomnia pacing their floor. But in the darkness of my new bedroom, with moonlight casting long shadows across the wall, other explanations crept into my mind. The next day I decided to explore the building properly. The Blackwood had a certain elegance to it, with its marble-floored lobby and Art Deco light fixtures, but it also felt frozen in time. The brass directory near the entrance listed names next to apartment numbers, but several slots were empty. I counted them, 12 vacant units out of 42 total apartments. That seemed odd for a building with supposedly reasonable rent in a desirable neighborhood. I made a mental note to check rental listings online to see if these units were being advertised. As I wandered the hallways, I noticed another peculiarity. Many doors had no welcome mats, no shoes outside, not even the sound of television or conversation filtering through. It was as if people entered their apartments and simply ceased to exist. On the 6th floor, I found a door slightly ajar, apartment 6 billion. Curiosity got the better of me, and I peered inside, expecting to see moving boxes or maintenance work. Instead, the apartment appeared fully furnished but completely still, like a museum display of a living space rather than an actual home. A coffee cup sat on the kitchen counter, a newspaper spread open on the dining table. But the air had a stale quality to it, as if no one had breathed it in days. "Can I help you?" I nearly jumped out of my skin. Mr. Finch stood behind me, his face a mask of polite inquiry, but his eyes were cold. I was just exploring the building," I stammered. The door was open. "Ah, yes, Mr. Kellerman in 6 billion is away on business. I must have left it open after checking his plants." He stepped forward, gently pushing the door closed. We respect our residents' privacy at the Blackwood, I'm sure you understand. Of course, I said, backing away. I didn't mean to intrude. No harm done, though I would recommend staying on your own floor unless you're visiting someone specific. His smile didn't reach his eyes. The other residents can be territorial. That evening, I couldn't shake the image of that apartment, perfectly preserved but somehow empty of life. I tried searching online for information about the Blackwood, but found surprisingly little. A few mentions in historical records about its construction in 1942, a brief article about renovations in the 1980s, but nothing recent. No reviews from current or former residents, no listings for the supposedly vacant apartments. I did find one concerning piece of information, though. According to city records, the Blackwood had filed for 95% occupancy in its most recent tax assessment. Yet by my count of the directory, it was only about 70% full. Sleep eluded me again that night. The tapping returned, more insistent this time. Tap, 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 pause, tap, tap, tap. It seemed to move around the building, sometimes sounding from above, sometimes from the walls. Around midnight, I thought I heard someone crying, the sound so faint I might have imagined it. In the morning, dark circles under my eyes, I decided to be more proactive about meeting my neighbors. I baked cookies, a transparent but time-honored excuse to knock on doors, and started with 4 billion right across from me. No answer, 4A yielded Mrs. Abernathy, who accepted my cookies with trembling hands and darting eyes. You shouldn't be doing this, she whispered, glancing down the hallway. We don't socialize much here. I just wanted to introduce myself properly, I said, trying to peer past her into her apartment. The slice of visible space looked immaculate but sparse, almost unlived in. Well, you've done that now, she said, already closing the door. Thank you for the cookies. 4D remained unanswered, as did 4E at the end of the hall. As I stood there, cookies growing cold in my hands, I heard the elevator ding. An elderly man stepped out, using a cane to support himself. When he saw me, he froze momentarily before continuing toward 4D, keys already in hand. Hello, I called out, approaching him with a smile. I'm Eliza, your new neighbor in 4C. I brought cookies. He regarded me warily, his rheumy eyes narrowing. Harold Winters, he finally said, taking the offered cookie. You're very neighborly, just trying to get to know the building a bit better. It's so quiet here. Yes, he agreed, unlocking his door. That's why most of us stay, the quiet. He paused, seeming to debate something internally. How long have you been here now? Almost a month, he nodded slowly. Has Finch talked to you yet about the community guidelines? Just the usual stuff in the lease. No loud music, no redecorating without permission. Harold's expression changed subtly. He'll be around soon, I expect, once he's sure you're settled. He stepped into his apartment. Enjoy the quiet while you can, Eliza from 4C. The door closed with a decisive click, leaving me alone in the hallway with more questions than answers. That afternoon, I decided to work from the small courtyard behind the building. It was a modest space with a few iron benches and planters, enclosed by the U-shape of the Blackwood's wings. As I sat with my laptop, I counted windows, trying to map which ones corresponded to which apartments. Something caught my attention on the 5th floor, a face in a window watching me. When I waved, the figure retreated, curtains falling back into place. Throughout the next hour, I noticed other curtains moving slightly, other faces appearing and disappearing. I was being observed, catalogued. The sensation of being watched followed me back inside. In the elevator, I could have sworn I felt breath on the back of my neck, but when I turned, I was alone. The mirrored walls reflected only my increasingly paranoid expression. That night, the tapping was joined by a new sound, a slow, dragging noise from the hallway outside my apartment. I peered through the peephole but saw nothing in the dimly lit corridor. The dragging continued, moving past my door and toward the stairwell. Against my better judgment, I opened the door a crack. The hallway was empty, but a dark smudge marked the floor, trailing in the direction of the stairs. I closed and locked the door, then shoved a chair under the handle for good measure. Sleep came in fitful bursts, punctuated by strange dreams of empty rooms and faceless neighbors standing in doorways, watching me. In one particularly vivid nightmare, Mr. Finch stood at the foot of my bed, clipboard in hand, making notes as I pretended to sleep. Good occupancy rates, he murmured in the dream. Very good indeed. I woke gasping, sheets twisted around my legs, the first gray light of dawn filtering through my blinds. That morning there was a notice under my door, a reminder about the monthly building inspection scheduled for the following day. All residents were required to be present during their assigned time slot. Mine was 3 p.m. I spent the day researching the Blackwood more thoroughly, digging beyond the first page of search results. On page 6 of the results, I found a blog post from 3 years ago, written by someone claiming to be a former resident. Don't move into the Blackwood, whatever you do. The rent seems good, but there's a reason. Once you're in, they don't let you leave, not really. Finch is always watching, always listening. The other residents are too afraid to talk. I'm writing this from a library computer because I don't trust my own devices anymore. If you're reading this and you already live there, get out now. The post had no comments, and the blog itself seemed abandoned, with no further entries. I tried to trace the IP address or find contact information for the author, but the trail went cold. A chill settled over me as I recalled Harold's words, "Enjoy the quiet while you can," and Mrs. Abernathy's trembling hands. And the empty apartment with its coffee cup and newspaper, preserved like a museum exhibit. I was still mulling over these thoughts when a knock came at my door. Through the peephole, I saw Mr. Finch, smiling that too-wide smile. "Miss Eliza," he said when I opened the door, "I hope you're settling in nicely." "Yes, thank you," I lied, keeping the chain on the door. "Excellent. I just wanted to remind you personally about tomorrow's inspection. It's very important that you be present." "What exactly are you inspecting?" I asked. His smile flickered for just a moment. "Oh, the usual. Smoke detectors, water pressure, general maintenance concerns." He tilted his head slightly. "And occupancy verification, of course. Occupancy verification. Simply ensuring that the right residents are in the right units. City regulations, you understand." He consulted his clipboard. "I notice you've been quite social lately, baking cookies, exploring the building." My mouth went dry. "Just trying to be neighborly." While we encourage a sense of community at the Blackwood, we also value discretion. "Some of our residents have expressed concern about your curiosity." "I didn't mean to make anyone uncomfortable," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "I'm sure you didn't." His eyes, magnified by those thick glasses, seemed to look through me rather than at me. "Tomorrow at 3 then, please be sure you're home." After he left, I sat on my couch, heart racing. Something was very wrong at the Blackwood, and tomorrow's inspection suddenly felt ominous. I considered packing a bag and leaving, at least for a few days, but something told me that might make things worse. Instead, I decided to gather more information. I needed to know what happened to the previous tenant of 4C, the one who left suddenly due to company transfer. The building's mailroom was in the basement, rows of brass mailboxes lining one wall, a table for sorting packages against another. I'd only been down once when a delivery had been mistakenly left there instead of at my door. The basement had that distinctive underground smell, slightly damp, with notes of old concrete and dust. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in an unflattering, clinical glow. Besides the mailroom, there were several doors marked maintenance, storage, and building manager. I tried the handle of the building manager's office. Locked as expected. The maintenance room was also secured, but the storage door opened when I turned the knob. Inside were the usual items you'd expect: holiday decorations, old furniture, paint cans. But along the back wall stood several filing cabinets. I moved quickly, aware that Mr. Finch could appear at any moment. The cabinets were organized by apartment number. I found the drawer for the 4th floor and thumbed through until I reached 4C. The folder was surprisingly thick. Inside were lease agreements dating back decades, each with a different name. The most recent before mine belonged to Daniel Mercer, who had moved in just 6 months ago. According to his application, he was a 35-year-old software engineer, single, no pets. What struck me was the brevity of his tenancy. 6 months was hardly enough time to warrant a company transfer, especially in an age where remote work was so common. More concerning was what I found stapled to the back of his lease, a notice of lease violation dated just 2 weeks before I viewed the apartment. The violation cited unauthorized investigation of building operations and harassment of fellow residents. A handwritten note at the bottom read, "Resident exhibited dangerous curiosity, recommended for immediate vacancy processing." Immediate vacancy processing. The phrase sent a chill down my spine. I continued looking through the file and found something even more disturbing. A photograph of Daniel Mercer's apartment, my apartment now, taken apparently during an inspection. In it, I could see notes pinned to a corkboard, printouts of what looked like resident information, and a map of the building with certain apartments circled in red. The final document in the file was a vacancy report signed by Mr. Finch. It stated simply, "Unit 4C vacated on March 15. Resident relocated successfully. Unit ready for new occupancy as of March 30. The clinical language made it sound like Daniel Mercer had been a problematic piece of furniture that needed to be removed. I was so engrossed in the file that I didn't hear the basement door open. It was only when the storage room lights flickered that I looked up to see Mr. Finch standing in the doorway, his tall frame casting a long shadow across the floor. "Curiosity is such a troublesome trait," he said, his voice eerily calm. "Daniel had it too." I backed away, the file still in my hands. "What did you do to him?" "Do nothing he didn't agree to in his lease." He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. The Blackwood maintains a perfect occupancy rate, Miss Eliza. Perfect. Do you know how rare that is in property management? The directory shows empty apartments, I countered, still backing away until I hit the wall. Empty, no, not empty, just differently occupied. His smile stretched wider. You've been here almost a month now. Haven't you noticed how the sounds move around the building? How you might hear footsteps above you one night and beside you the next? A horrible realization began to dawn on me. The tapping, yes, the tapping, are long-term residents trying to communicate. They're still here, you see, all of them. The Blackwood never loses a tenant. He adjusted his glasses. Some just transitioned to a different type of occupancy. My mind raced to the blog post I'd found, to Harold's warning, to Mrs. Abernathy's fear. You can't keep people here against their will. Against their will, hardly. It's all in the lease, Miss Eliza. Page 17, subsection C. Tenant agrees to maintain occupancy for the duration specified with extensions as determined by management. Most people never read that far. He took another step toward me. Daniel didn't until he started asking questions, poking around just like you're doing now. I glanced desperately around the storage room, looking for a weapon, an escape route, anything. I'll go to the police. With what evidence? A lease clause you willingly signed, some files you stole while trespassing in a private area. He shook his head. Besides, the police have investigated the Blackwood before. They find nothing amiss. Just a quiet building with a remarkably stable tenant population. The pieces were falling into place, the preserved apartment upstairs, the dragging sounds in the hallway, the faces watching from windows. Tomorrow's inspection, I said, my voice barely a whisper. It's not about maintenance at all, is it? It's about determining what kind of resident you're going to be, Miss Eliza. The kind who lives quietly, minds their own business, and enjoys our reasonable rent, or the kind who needs to transition to a different arrangement. He held out his hand. Now, why don't you give me that file and we can pretend this little incident never happened? I handed him the file, my fingers trembling. As he took it, I noticed something I hadn't before, a small key hanging from a chain around his neck, partially hidden by his collar. Smart choice, he said, tucking the file under his arm. I really do hope you decide to be a model tenant. The paperwork for transitions is such a bother. He stood aside, gesturing for me to exit first. As I passed him, he added, I'll see you tomorrow at 3, to be punctual. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? I packed a small bag with essentials, planning to leave first thing in the morning. I'd forfeit my security deposit, write off the first month's rent, start over somewhere else, anywhere else. But when I tried to leave at 6 a.m., my key wouldn't work in the main entrance. I tried the back door, the emergency exit, all locked, all requiring a key that suddenly didn't function. Leaving so soon, Mrs. Abernathy stood in the hallway in her bathrobe, watching me struggle with the emergency exit. It won't work, not after you've raised concerns. What is this place? I demanded. What happens during these inspections? She glanced nervously at the ceiling, where a small camera I'd never noticed before was pointed directly at us. They determine if you're a disruption to the building's harmony. If you are, she trailed off, then rolled up her sleeve to reveal a strange mark on her inner wrist, a small, circular scar. They make adjustments. What kind of adjustments? The kind that ensure you maintain occupancy without causing problems. She pulled her sleeve down quickly. 17 years I've been here. I can't leave physically, but some days I'm not really here at all. None of us are. A door opened further down the hallway, and she scurried away like a frightened animal. Harold emerged from 4D, fully dressed despite the early hour.